Picture this. It's a cold night in London, November 1875. In a quiet room lit by gas lamps, Britain's Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli leans over a polished table with one of the most powerful bankers in Europe, Lionel de Rothschild. On that table lies a single, astonishing opportunity: almost half the shares of the Suez Canal Company. Those shares belong to Isma'il Pasha, ruler of Egypt. He is desperate. Within weeks, Egypt will default on its debts. To save his regime, Ismail is prepared to sell the most strategic waterway on Earth, the new shortcut between Europe and Asia. Disraeli doesn't hesitate. Parliament is not in session. There is no budget line, no formal approval. But he knows the stakes. If the French get these shares first, they will control Britain's highway to India. So, on what he later calls a gentleman's agreement, Rothschild advances more than £4 million in cash. No debate, no delay. Telegrams fly, couriers race. In Cairo, Ismail hands over the certificates. A few weeks later, Queen Victoria receives a brief, electric message from her Prime Minister. "It is settled. You have it, madam." In that moment, one ruler's dream of independence collapses into debt, and another empire tightens its grip. The Suez Canal becomes more than a ditch through the desert. It becomes the golden chain that will bind Egypt to Britain for generations. Why does that late-night deal still matter? Because behind the romance of pharaohs and pyramids lies a brutal modern story: how loans, infrastructure, and fear can quietly turn a sovereign country into someone else's account. Egypt, under Isma'il Pasha, wasn't a sleepy backwater. It was one of the most ambitious modernization experiments of the 19th century. And yet, within little more than a decade, that same state lost control of its finances, surrendered its most valuable asset, and watched foreign officials take charge of its budget. From there, the dominoes fell fast. Nationalist revolt, naval bombardment, a desert battle at Tel el Kabir, and British boots in Cairo. Today, when countries borrow billions for ports, railways, and canals, Egypt's story feels uncomfortably familiar. What happens when your development is built on someone else's money, secured on your future taxes? To understand that, we have to go back to Cairo's new boulevards, the cotton fields, and that thin blue line slashing through the sand. Now imagine Cairo in the 1860s. On the eastern side, Old Cairo twists with crowded alleys and minarets. On the western bank of the Nile, something entirely different rises from the dust. Straight, tree-lined boulevards, gas lamps, European facades, gardens, and palaces. Isma'il Pasha strides through this new quarter in a European uniform. Educated in Paris, he famously declares, "My country is no longer in Africa. We are now part of Europe." He means it. New Cairo will prove it. He pours money into everything. Thousands of miles of irrigation canals slice through the countryside, turning more land over to cash crops. Railways lace the Nile Valley to Alexandria and Suez. New telegraph lines and schools promise a modern state. On paper, it's breathtaking. On the balance sheet, it's terrifying. When Ismail takes power, Egypt's debt hovers around a few £1 million. By the mid-1870s, it's near 100 million, over 10 times the state's annual revenue. How did that happen so fast? Timing. During the American Civil War, Union blockades cut off cotton from the southern United States. British mills panic. Cotton prices explode. Egypt, with its rich Nile soils and quick access to Europe, steps into the gap. For a few dazzling years, the Nile Valley becomes a Klondike of cotton. Exports soar, tax receipts swell, and Isma'il and his European bankers convince themselves this river of money will never dry up. So Egypt borrows more, at higher stakes. But the boom rests on someone else's war. In 1865, peace returns to America, and so does American cotton. Prices collapse. Egypt is left with huge debts, big projects, and suddenly far less income. A cautious ruler might slam on the brakes. Isma'il steps on the gas. He gambles on sugar plantations and keeps building. And looming over everything, like a glittering promise and a hidden trap, lies the Suez Canal. The canal is both miracle and wound. Ferdinand de Lesseps, the charismatic French promoter, wins a sweeping concession from Egypt's previous ruler. His company gets land, legal privileges, and most importantly, the right to conscript local labor. Tens of thousands of Egyptian peasants, the fellahin, are drafted through the corvée system, forced labor. Under the desert sun, with minimal tools, they dig and haul and die by the thousands from disease, exhaustion, and accidents. Later, after European pressure ends forced labor, an arbitration by Napoleon III orders Egypt to compensate the Suez Canal Company for lost privileges. The sum is enormous. To pay, Isma'il borrows yet again, this time specifically to settle with the very company whose shares Egypt partly owns. By the time the canal opens in 1869, it has cost Egypt not just lives and terrain, but also crippling new debts. And here's the cruel twist. At first, the canal's traffic is far below rosy forecasts. Toll revenues trickle in compared to the torrents of interest Egypt owes. Isma'il's government holds 44% of the Suez Canal Company. On paper, that stake is a national treasure, a golden goose. In reality, it becomes collateral, something lenders stare at hungrily as Egypt's finances unravel. European bankers have perfected a specific kind of sovereign loan. When Egypt issues a big loan in London or Paris, the numbers look vast, 10, 20, even 30 million pounds. But because of heavy discounts and fees, the Khedive's treasury receives only a fraction of the headline amount. He still owes interest and principal on the full figure. In return, he pledges slices of Egypt's future. The customs duties, railway income, the salt tax, whole provinces' tax receipts. By 1875, around two-thirds of Egypt's annual revenue goes straight to servicing foreign debt. Schools, the army, basic administration, everything else must fight over the scraps. Then, in the autumn of that year, the music stops. Lenders, spooked by wider financial crises and the Ottoman Empire's own troubles, refuse to extend more credit. No new loans, no rollovers. The Egyptian treasury is out of cash, out of tricks, and out of time. Isma'il has one glittering asset left, those 176,000 Suez Canal shares. He first turns to the French. The company is French-dominated. Paris bankers seem the natural buyers. Negotiations quietly begin. In London, alarm bells ring. To Britain, the canal is now the Indian door key, the vital shortcut to the jewel of the empire. Most of the ships using it are British. Letting France gain complete financial control over the company seems suicidal. Disraeli sees a narrow window. Parliament is in recess, so he cannot seek formal approval. Instead, he calls on Rothschild. Rothschild agrees to front the cash at 5% interest, plus a generous commission. There will be questions later. There will be fury from the opposition. But if they move fast, Britain can block the French and seize the prize. Messengers race to Cairo with the British offer. It's slightly better than the French proposal and far more certain. Isma'il, facing imminent default, accepts. The share certificates are physically handed over at the British consulate. By December 1875, Britain owns 44% of the Suez Canal Company, making it the largest single shareholder. Disraeli announces the deal and basks in a wave of public approval. Critics like William Gladstone attack the constitutional shortcuts and the generous Rothschild fees. But the deed is done. Britain now holds the key shareholder position in the waterway that links London to Bombay. Over the coming decades, canal traffic explodes and the dividends flow. Britain recoups its $4 million and more. The shares become a hugely profitable investment. For Egypt, the story is very different. The £4 million disappear almost instantly into interest payments. The sale buys only a brief delay. The debt crisis doesn't end. It deepens. Within months, Egypt suspends payment on some obligations. Official bankruptcy follows. Foreign bondholders panic. Their governments move from persuasion to control. In 1876, Britain and France force Isma'il to accept the creation of the Caisse de la dette publique. On the surface, it's a commission to stabilize Egypt's finances. In reality, it acts like a foreign tax collector planted in Cairo. The Caisse takes direct control of some of Egypt's richest revenue streams, customs duties, tobacco, and the taxes of key provinces, to guarantee that bondholders are paid before anyone else. Soon, this becomes formal dual control. A British controller of revenue and a French controller of expenditure sit inside the government itself, vetting budgets, ordering reforms, blocking policies that threaten debt service. In 1880, under Ismail's more compliant son Tawfiq, the law of liquidation goes even further. It mandates that fully half of all state revenue must go to servicing the debt. The other half has to cover everything else: the army, schools, roads, administration. The human cost is immediate. Thousands of Egyptian officers are placed on half pay. Soldiers go unpaid for months. Civil servants are dismissed or see their salaries slashed. In villages, tax collectors push peasants to breaking point so that foreign coupons can be clipped on time in London and Paris. Modernization, which was supposed to protect Egypt from foreign dominance, has become the weapon used to enforce it. Anger boils over. In barracks and coffee houses, in village councils and city salons, Egyptians begin to see a pattern. Their country is being run to serve foreign investors, not its own people. At the heart of the backlash stands Colonel Ahmad Urabi. He is an army officer of peasant origin, fella in uniform, rising from the very class that dug the canals and paid the taxes. Under the slogan, "Egypt for the Egyptians," Urabi attacks not only the old Turco-Circassian elite dominating the officer corps, but also the foreign controls strangling the state. Landowners, intellectuals, and ordinary peasants rally to his side. By late 1881, Urabi's movement has forced the Khedive to dismiss an unpopular ministry. By early 1882, Urabi is Minister of War, demanding a constitution and a serious reduction in foreign influence. To London and Paris, this looks dangerous. It's not just about prestige, it's about risk to the Suez Canal and to the predictable, punctual stream of debt payments. Then, in June 1882, riots erupt in Alexandria. Dozens of Europeans are killed in the chaos. For the British government, that becomes the trigger. On July 11th, British warships in Alexandria's harbour open fire on the coastal batteries. The city burns for days. Civilians flee through smoke and rubble. As the Navy pounds the coast, a British expeditionary force lands and marches inland, aiming to break Urabi's army before it can threaten the canal zone. At dawn on September 13th, near Tel el Kabir, they strike. Under cover of darkness, British troops advance across open desert toward Urabi's lines. Just before sunrise, they launch a sudden attack. The nationalist positions, poorly entrenched and badly coordinated, collapse in less than an hour. Urabi's forces scatter. He is captured, tried, and exiled. British troops enter Cairo without serious resistance. Khedive Tawfiq is restored as a compliant figurehead. Behind him now stands a British advisor class that quietly dominates Egypt's politics and finances. This is the beginning of what historians call the Veiled Protectorate, an occupation in everything but name, lasting until the 20th century. The road from loan contracts to naval guns is complete. So what did it all mean? Isma'il Pasha believed that by modernizing faster than anyone else, he could secure Egypt's autonomy. Railways, schools, irrigation canals, and the Suez Canal itself were meant to be shields against foreign domination. But to build those shields, he borrowed from the very powers he feared. He pledged future taxes, public works, even shares in the canal. In the hands of European creditors, those pledges became levers. Debt, in this case, proved sharper than any bayonet. Britain and France didn't need to conquer Egypt in the old style. They captured its revenue streams. By the time British troops marched through the desert, the state's financial machinery was already in foreign hands. For Britain, the 1875 purchase of Suez shares was never just about profit. It was a geopolitical insurance policy. Deny France a monopoly over the canal, secure the route to India, and gain a permanent reason to protect Egypt. For Egyptians, the memory cut in another direction. The auction of the canal shares, the humiliations of dual control, and the gunfire at Tel el Kabir fed a deep, lasting nationalism. In 1956, when Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, defying Britain and France, he wasn't merely seizing a waterway. He was symbolically reversing Ismail's forced sale, reclaiming by decree what debt had wrenched away. The brief war that followed ended with British withdrawal and confirmed that the old age of financial empire in Egypt was over. And yet, the questions this history raises are still with us. Around the world, nations borrow heavily to build ports, power plants, and high-speed rail. They sign contracts that pledge future tolls, taxes, and fees. They hope that growth will outrun interest. Sometimes it does. Often, it doesn't. Egypt's 19th century saga forces us to ask, when does a loan become a leash? When does development finance quietly erode sovereignty? And who really owns the infrastructure that transforms a country's landscape? The Suez Canal still slices through the Egyptian desert, crowded with ships carrying oil, containers, and grain. It still generates billions in tolls, but its history reminds us that steel and concrete are never neutral. They are woven through with contracts, power, and sometimes resignation. Next time you see that thin blue line on the map, linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, think not only of engineering genius, think of forced laborers in the sand, of a ruler pawning his canal shares, of bankers in London counting dividends, of shells falling on Alexandria and a colonel shouting, "Egypt for the Egyptians!" The canal changed global trade. Through debt and force, it also changed the meaning of sovereignty. And every time a government today signs a loan for its own Suez Canal of the modern age, echoes of that cold November night in London still linger in the room.